Feel good? All right. All right. There we go. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Heavenly Father, thank you for the gift of storytelling. We tell stories because we image you, and you tell stories with history. Help us to be attentive to your calling, your purposes for us, and keep us always attentive to your Son. Ask you to bless this time of fellowship, and may this time be pleasing to you. We ask this through Christ our Lord. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Welcome to the third or fourth iteration of TOTS. This one I feel a little overwhelmed about, just because Star Wars means a lot to people, and so I'm just going to do my best not to butcher anything. I did so much research the last several months on this, and here's what I came up with. So I just want everyone, hopefully this does not destroy your ears, but just listen to this for about 5 seconds. Stop. All right, so when I play that, I want everyone to just think, what did you think about? What, right, Star Wars, like, it's just boom. The beginning. And there's the opening crawl, just like all these memories flood your mind, and there's something to be said about that. Why? Why is there all this nostalgia with this, but not with other franchises? This franchise of Star Wars, by the way, is over 4 times bigger, more profitable than Star Trek. It is one of the leading multimedia franchises in the world. It's only bypassed by Pokemon, Winnie the Pooh, I think, Mickey Mouse, yeah. It's right up there with Disney Princess. It's like the third or fourth largest multimedia franchise in the entire world. Right, I guess technically this is a Disney Princess movie too, right? No. Leia? No. Kylo Ren, Disney Princess? No? and think about this, guys. In 1977, when George Lucas was, or the years leading up to this, in the mid-70s, when he was pitching this concept of this great saga in space, he brought it to Disney. Disney said, that won't work. Okay, think about that. Now guess who owns it? Disney, right? A bunch of other studios wouldn't do it. They didn't have like the special effects and stuff. They're like, it won't sell. And Fox said, we'll do it. And overnight, it became this international sensation. It was so meaningful to people. And so what I want to talk about today is, why is it so meaningful? So, because I want to make it entertaining for you guys. So here's the question, what is meaning? But really, I think we should make t-shirts about this for TOTS. Why does it mean, right? Why does something mean something? What does meaning really mean? In other words, why does something mean? Okay, I want to talk about this with Star Wars. The reason I have, who is it? What's this? Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is super meaningful to people. And it was a sensation. What year was the last book published by Tolkien of the Lord of the Rings? Tolkien aficionados? 1955. 1955, and it took the world by storm. It was so meaningful to people. And I would suggest that it's the same reason why Star Wars was so meaningful in its day and age. All right, let's get to some meaning. What is this from? Lord of the Rings. What is this? What part of the movie or the book? What is this? I wish the ring didn't come to me. And what does Gandalf say? What's that? It had to be. I have the quote right here. Bilbo was meant to find the, in which case you are also meant to have it. And that is an encouraging thought. So what is Gandalf mentioning that we Catholics would call that? You were meant to find the ring. What does that mean? Does that mean that this whole story is about Frodo destroying the ring? No. We call this, guys, we call this providence or predestination. And so as a Catholic, this is throughout history. Are things like determined? Is there fate? Is there destiny? Or is it just our free will? Catholics, we believe in both and. God is going to use, no matter what we choose, somehow for his end. We obviously are either going to be willing participants in that or unwilling participants in that. He's either going to use our disobedience or our obedience somehow for his great end. And I would argue this is what gives meaning to Lord of the Rings. In that way, it enters our world at a time when people really didn't believe in a lot of meaning. What is this from? Pirates of the Caribbean. Who's that lady? Calypso. And what does she say in this scene? I don't know if you guys remember. She's talking to Will Turner, and she says, there is a touch of, you guys remember this? Not evil. Close. A touch of destiny about this one. You guys remember that? Okay, so again, here's another example of where destiny, and guess what? People love Pirates of the Caribbean. Why? Because it's not just a story about science fiction or something. There's something magical, something greater than the characters. They're participating in a greater story. So in the 70s, late 60s and 70s, there was a lot going on in the world. And people were really taken up with consumerism, technology, with atheistic regimes throughout the world. Look at what man can do. We can go on the moon. We can conquer everything. And, the world is at our fingertips. We can this is Woodstock, by the way. Lots of bad things that came from that. Just a lot of, call that like hedonistic. People just overly concerned with physical things, with creation. And that really took a toll, I would say, on the spirituality of the people. Where do we find meaning? If God is really in charge of everything, how do I enter into that? Thus enters the great philosophical minds reclaiming this. I would say with Tolkien. Tolkien, I would argue, his books are, if not the most, certainly one of the most influential works of the 20th century. I would say that Lucas, in his movies, his way of storytelling is also drawing on that tradition. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. What is this? Sam carrying up Mount Doom. Doom is an ancient word that Tolkien often associates with what? Fate, destiny, fate. What is this guy? Darth Maul. What is the song? What's that? What's the famous? Duel of the Fates, right? So my point is, Tolkien and Lucas, when they're talking about storytelling to really captivate an audience, about really meaningful stories, they're talking about providence. There's something else greater going on, right? The reason why this is Mount Doom, this is a doom that Eru Ilúvatar is taking on the world. This is where he's going to settle the account. There's that mountain is tied up with fate. This guy is tied up with the fate of Anakin's life, his fall to the dark side. What does that guy do? Who's him? Who's he? Han Solo. What does he say in that scene? I want you guys to think about this. Huh? They're talking about the Force. Ain't no mystical energy field controls my destiny. Here again, this movie is about destiny. What is this? This is Luke. And by the way, guys, Luke S. What's George Lucas, right? This is a story about George Lucas, how he sees the world. This is the first time that we will hear the Force theme, which is one of the most recognizable. Can anyone hum it for me? Do 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 do. Right? Right? The sense of longing, of purpose, of destiny, that there's something greater that he has to be a part of. All right, before we go any further, who are these guys? So this is J.R. Tolkien. Who's that guy? Does anyone know who that is? John Williams, yep. So he's the guy who did all the classical music. So whenever you guys are hearing like the Forest theme, he did a lot of music that's most recognizable. Things like Harry Potter. I think he did, what are some other ones? Jurassic Park. Indiana Jones. You guys ever watch a movie that was published the last 100 years? He made it. Just kidding. And George Lucas. All right. Tolkien was a Catholic. Just fun background, just because a lot of you guys are interested in this stuff. He's not very religious. Does anyone know what George Lucas, his religion is? Yeah. No, he said that, yeah. He says that he's a Buddhist Methodist, which I just find that funny. I'm sorry, I don't know what that means, but it's just funny. Okay. All right, so here's a quote that George Lucas, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I just find it really interesting that he's talking about like this meaninglessness of the world. And look what he says right here. Once the atomic bomb came, everyone got into monsters and science and what would happen with this and what would happen with that. I think speculative fiction is very valid, but they forget the fairy tales and the dragons and Tolkien and all the real heroes. So he's drawing on this legacy of fairy tales and myth, this thing that Tolkien was so concerned about. And that's why he starts, before he published the movie in 1977, he decided this has to go in the front so I can tell everyone, this is a fairy tale. This isn't science fiction, right? I'm not concerned with things being exact with how science would operate. I'm worried about the story of a fairy tale. And as all good fairy tales have a princess. Who's that? Princess Leia. They have a hero. They have a wizard. And you guys, I want you to focus. When Owen Lars is talking in this movie, he actually references Ben Obi-Wan Kenobi as that wizard. He actually calls him a wizard. And then there's a mysterious dark tower. Yep, that's a Death Star. And an evil sorcerer.
Darth Vader.
This is a fairy tale. Here's a quote from George Lucas. The story being told in Star Wars is a classic one. Every few hundred years, the story is retold. Now, we're going to revisit just this idea. Last Tots, I talked a lot about the Tree of Tales. You guys remember that?
No.
The Tree of Tales? Okay, I'll jog your memory. We'll get to it. That's the Tree of Tales. I took a picture of it for you guys. Just kidding. I didn't actually take that picture.
Wow, interesting. Very
All right. Quick recap from last time. So, all stories in the entire world, Tolkien says, guys, this is a tree, not an atomic explosion. Should I put a tree, a swing on it?
Perfect.
Okay.
Like a swing.
All right. So on this, there's leaves, right? And every leaf, he says, every leaf
It's a fairy tale.
is discovered. Yep. There's a great tree of fairy tales, of the great story. And every time that we write a new story, we're actually just discovering a new leaf. We're not actually just creating it out of our heads. It's already existing because there's a great story. This is also an iteration. I don't know if anyone knows who Joseph Campbell is. Does anyone know who? He was actually Catholic. Became a relativist. It's a long story. But anyway, he knew like Carl Jung and a lot of those psychoanalysts, for those who are familiar with that. He says the myth does not point to a fact. The myth points beyond the facts to something that informs the fact. And in other words, he's talking about this great reality out of which everything else flows. Anytime that you pull on a myth, a great story that really moves your soul, and you're like, wow, that's really exciting, he's talking about it's another story. He calls that the monomyth. And this was extremely, George Lucas says, extremely important to his development of Star Wars. When he was making Star Wars in the mid-70s, he said, I need to change up the script after he read his book, A Hero with a Thousand Faces. Max Rebo! But let's talk about the elephant in the room. He's not actually an elephant. Oops. That actually is an elephant. Yeah, it's a bantha, but who plays this? Who plays the bantha? It's an elephant. It's a real elephant who plays the bantha. So fun fact, there's an elephant underneath there. Apparently the elephant really liked to wear the bantha costume. Let's address the elephant in the room. And this is a quote from George Lucas. He says that all religions are true, they just see a different part of the elephant. The heresy! Okay. All right, because there's kids here, I just want to let you guys know that's a bad idea. That's not right, okay? That's heresy. Hashtag heresy. Hashtag heresy. Okay, I say hashtag, you guys say heresy. Hashtag heresy. Good. Okay, so what he's talking about is, he's like, oh, there's a big old tree here. You know, this tree is all real, and everything else goes onto it, but we can't actually ever get to the tree. So he's talking about, this is an ancient proverb, somewhere in India or in Asia came out about, it's talking about religions. How do we account for religions? Can you guys see this okay? All right, here's a room, it's really small, and there's a big old elephant in it. You guys see this? Oh boy. All right, and everyone is inside this room, and they're pushed up against the wall, and they're like, someone says, describe what it is. And they're like, it's a spear, says the guy who's by the tusk. Oh, it's a trunk. It's really long and snake-like. And another guy's, he's by the butt, and he's like, it's a rope, and he's on the tail. And another guy, he's by the ears, and he's like, oh, it's all flappy, right? And what George Lucas is trying to say is, he's like, that's what religion is like. That everyone's stuck inside this room and they can't really know what God is. They can't really know what the truth is. They're just God is so immense, and they're just in such a tiny room that they just feel at it. And you can kind of see that a little bit when he's talking about the Force. I would say actually that a later iteration, I would say how Disney tries to interpret the Force is closer to that. We're actually going to talk about that more at the next Tots, but I want you guys to keep that image of the elephant in the room. There it is. But what's wrong with that, guys? What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that is that it says that everyone in that room has an equally valid way of understanding the elephant. Okay? I'm just going to tell you right now, as a priest, I gave up my whole life for one particular view of the elephant. Right? I believe that the elephant has shown himself. Who would the elephant be? Right? The Logos, Jesus, right? Christianity. Christianity is the elephant. That is the tree out of which all other stories are modeled after. And this is what Tolkien was really getting at when he was talking about on fairy stories. Myth and fairy story must, as all art, reflect and contain in solution elements of moral and religious truth. And so whenever we find really awesome things like Star Wars that really move our soul, and we're like, wow, that's awesome. It's like you've recovered part of like your soul. And Tolkien even uses that language. He says recovery, good fiction, good fairy tales offer us recovery and to see our world correctly. Because now we see it with providence, or we see it with heroes, and we see it with this battle between good and evil. Just like what God has done with the great tree and what he has revealed in history. As J.R.R. Tolkien says, he says, history resembles myth because they're both ultimately of the same stuff. So on the one hand, where we make myths with stories and characters and words and we write them down, God makes myth through history. In other words, and he'll say this, I have a quote in here later, about how history is God's myth. It's God's way of sharing story. And Tolkien uses that word very specifically. The other thing I'm going to write down, mythos is the Greek word for story. And the logos, which is the elephant, right? So there's this relationship between the two. Here's the big quote. Stick with me, guys. The Gospels contain a fairy story. Okay, now I'm never going to say this at the pulpit because everyone's going to walk away and say, Father's a heretic. He thinks that nothing's true. That's not true. Listen to what Tolkien's saying. The Gospels contain a fairy story or a story of a larger kind, big old tree, that embraces all the essence of all fairy stories. But this story has entered history and the primary world. It is the elephant. It has preeminently the inner consistency of reality. There is no tale ever told that men would ever rather find was true, and none which so many skeptical men have accepted as true on its own merits. For the art of it has a supremely convincing tone of primary art, that is of creation. And this story is supreme, and it is true. Art has been verified. God is the Lord of angels and of men and of elves. Legend and history have met and fused. In other words, he's talking about the tree. All right, where is this from? Does anyone know this? It got destroyed recently and then... Huh? Notre Dame, yep. The Great Rose Window, it's very famous. This is a similar concept that is, I think, held throughout all of Christianity, even finding like scriptures. God has spoken to us in varied and obscure ways, but now he reveals himself in Hebrews through his son. Who's at the center? Mary and the Logos, right? Jesus. And he's at the center of everything. And as you go out, as you go further and further away from the tree, you get to lesser and lesser things, right? People, animals. Look, there's a cow or something, right? A horse. Maybe it's a tauntaun. I don't know. Okay. Here's another example of this. Where is this? What's that?
Is it the
Chapel in Sistine Chapel. Yep, not the 16th chapel. It's the Sistine Chapel. Why is it called Sistine? Because that's the guy who made it, right? Okay. Or the guy, the Pope at the time. Anyway, on the top, I don't know if you guys remember. That's like the famous picture of God going like this to Adam. Okay. Over here, there's a bunch of different pagan philosophers and old stories and things that aren't Christian or Jewish. You might think, why did someone put those on there? And I think it's a similar idea. All of those have like an element of truth, but they aren't the truth. They all point someone in. And there's something about those kinds of stories that should lead us to Jesus. They reawaken us to what reality is. In the same way, all those things that happened in the past, there's stories around the great tree that help us understand what Christianity is about. They prepare us for it. After all, I believe that legends and myths are largely made of truth, and indeed, present aspects of it that can be only received in this mode. In other words, sometimes the only way that we can really understand those things is through stories. And how does Jesus teach us about his great teachings about the Father often? What does he use? What's that? Parables, right? Those are stories. And long ago, certain truths and modes of this way were discovered and must always reappear in this way. Ah! Oh my gosh. I have no idea what just happened. Guys, this is so fast. Ah! All right, look out for this. Ah! All right, things I want you to look out for. Remember in this movie, I never want you guys to say, oh, everyone stop the movie. He broke his toe at this time. Okay, you guys remember that? When everyone's like, oh, I know Star Wars stuff. Yeah, he bumped his head. So no one has to say that. I said it right now, okay? So you guys have seen it. He bumps his head in the Death Star. Everyone look out for it, but we don't have to say anything. We can all laugh together. Ha! We'll all go like this. Ha! All right, what do these things have in common? This is Joe Johnson. He's the guy who directed Captain America, the first Avenger, and he's also the guy who played this Stormtrooper. See, I'm flexing right now. All right, I just really like this scene because this is just like, she's like a light in the darkness. And just look how, like, this is so industrial, guys. And you can just tell she's a princess. At this point, she doesn't even say anything. And you know what she is. That's good storytelling. George Lucas really had an eye for visual storytelling. He even said at one point, he said, you could use all my films as silent films, and just the music in the background would tell the whole story. What is this?
A ship.
What?
The one that Leia was on.
All right, so a lot of people try to call it the Tantive. It's actually the Tantive, okay? So you guys will walk away and don't say you didn't learn anything today. This is the Tantive, not the Tantive or Tantive or any of that other stuff.
Oh,
Who's that guy?
something.
I think his name is Labria. Anyway, Obi-Wan Kenobi is going to talk about the scum and villainy of this galaxy. They're all here. I feel like this represents a little bit about what the 70s was going through, this sort of like meaninglessness. When you go into that bar, those people, they don't care about destiny or force or any of that stuff. They're just concerned with the outer extremities, the things, just the leaves. It doesn't lead them to any truth. They're just content with leaves. Death Star, I just love this image. It's just, everything of the Empire is so ugly and efficient. So now, what do orcs make? They make very clever things, but not pretty things, just like the Empire. They're so consumed with control and power, just like, the Ring of Power and all that stuff, Tolkien and all that stuff. They can no longer make beautiful things. Let me just make a connection here for you guys. I'm going to answer that question right now because I think the Empire shows us. Why does it mean? Why do things mean stuff? It's this relationship right here. This is what meaning is. You say, wow, that meant a lot to me. It got at something that Christ is. That's the relationship of fairy tales to Christianity, to the elephant. It's meaning. This is a very important line. I'm going to talk about this at the next tots, but this is so much tied with destiny. But right, he wants to be like his father. There's just this touch of destiny about him. Who's that guy? What's that? What's his name?
He's the guy that got choked by Darth Vader. That's all we
Yeah, he gets choked by Darth Vader. I actually can't recall his name right now. Oh boy, and this is getting recorded.
I know who that is.
But again, here's an example of where he doesn't see anything beyond just the leaves. He doesn't believe in the Force. He doesn't believe in destiny. Doesn't believe in any of that stuff. And Darth Vader doesn't like him, and we're not meant to like him either. Again, so besides just the recovery, remember this is Mount Doom. This is Sam. How does evil get conquered?
By conquering them.
By this eucatastrophe. And we talked about that before. It's like this moment, this turn of divine intervention. And how does Luke become the hero? This is why I think makes Star Wars so great. Yeah. He blows up the Death Star.
By using the Force?
By using the Force, right? So a lot of times in other movies like Captain America, not that Captain America is a bad movie or anything, but he becomes an awesomer, more awesome buff version of Steve Rogers by the end of the movie, right? I mean, he's just getting more power. He's cool. He's awesome. But like Luke Skywalker, right? He's gaining skills, but throughout the entire franchise, he has to get saved. He has to surrender. In that way, there's this element of providence, of the tree sort of coming into to reality to save him. And that's what happens here. Obi-Wan Kenobi used the Force. All right, here's another quote about sound effects. He says, sound and music are 50% of entertainment in a movie. It's so interesting because he also thinks that dialogue, he said this in an interview, dialogue is like a sound effect. So all of his scenes should say something. What is this? What does the scene say? Come on. Obi-Wan, yeah, you're my only hope. Come on, guys, you know this. I'm Luke Skywalker. I've come to rescue you. Cover me, Porkins, right? I'm right behind you, Red 3, right? What does this one say? Come on. These are not the droids you were looking for, right? Guys, these are so memorable because George Lucas, even though it's his method of understanding sound, if I showed you a bunch of scenes from the new Star Wars movies, I guarantee you none of you would be able to quote them. Not because you don't know it, but because it's not memorable. I hate sand. I don't like sand, right? It's coarse, rough, gets everywhere. It also makes it easy. You are my brother. You are like a brother to me, right? It's memorable. Right? Again, he intends more of a kinship with silent films more than any modern film. I like the old cinema with that sort of classical music. My films are more of a hybrid, a different style of filmmaking, what I like to call talking head movies. Some people don't get it, especially the academic types. So that's just, I want you guys to think about that, like how quotable this movie is and how genius it is. Like all the characters, they just wear their emotions right on their sleeve. They just say straight up what they're about. All right, and we'll end. We have come from God, and inevitably the myths woven by us, though they contain error, they're not perfect, will also reflect a splintered fragment of the true light, the eternal truth that is with God. So again, guys, if you're walking away with anything, what is the elephant in the room? Jesus, right? So everything, if it has an element of truth, it touches on it, that's good. But that's why we love stories, because they express the true story. And what's the true story? Jesus, the Jesus story, the Christianity, the gospel. So, all right.
Movie.
Boom. Movie time, right?
Wow, that's a great movie. Look. Look, it's so interesting. Wow, that's so
Yeah, should we just watch this for 2 hours?
No.
Okay. Can you? Yeah.
Your computer battery's getting low.
Oh, it's okay.